Today on Bench Briefs, we're looking at a recent decision from the Supreme Court of Canada that touches on some important questions about criminal law and procedural fairness. In RV Archambault, released on November 1st, 2024, the court weighed in on how certain criminal statutes should be interpreted, the rules around evidence in criminal trials, and the protection of constitutional rights during investigations. This case offers a fresh perspective on how courts balance the need for effective law enforcement with safeguarding individual rights. So, what happened in this case? Archambault, the appellant, was charged with criminal offenses under Canadian law. While the exact nature of the alleged conduct hasn't been publicly detailed in exhaustive terms, the case centers on the interactions between Archambault and law enforcement that led to these charges. The police gathered evidence through a series of investigative steps, and this evidence became critical in the trial. Along the way, questions arose about whether the evidence was properly obtained and whether Archambault's procedural and constitutional rights were respected. The case made its way through the lower courts, where judges examined the facts and the law, but ultimately the Supreme Court was asked to clarify some key points. At the heart of the Supreme Court's review were several important legal issues. First, the court had to interpret and apply the relevant criminal statutes. This means looking closely at the wording of the laws under which Archambault was charged to determine how they should be understood in this particular context. Statutory interpretation can be complex, especially when laws are broad or ambiguous, so this step is crucial for ensuring consistency and fairness. Second, the court examined the admissibility and sufficiency of the evidence. In criminal trials, not all evidence is automatically allowed. Courts must decide whether the evidence was collected legally and whether it meets the standards needed to support a conviction. If evidence is improperly obtained or insufficient, it can't be used to convict someone. The Supreme Court looked carefully at the evidence in Archambault's case to decide if it passed these tests. Third, and perhaps most importantly, the court considered whether any procedural or constitutional rights were violated during the investigation or trial. For example, did law enforcement follow the rules around searches, seizures, and interrogation? Were Archambault's rights to a fair trial and due process upheld? These questions go to the very core of the Canadian justice system, which must protect individual freedoms while also allowing the state to enforce the law. The court also addressed issues like the proper standard of proof required to convict someone and whether the lower courts made any legal errors in their reasoning. The standard of proof in criminal cases is beyond a reasonable doubt, a high bar designed to prevent wrongful convictions. Making sure the standard is applied correctly is vital for justice. Why does this case matter? R.V. Archambault highlights the ongoing challenges courts face in balancing effective policing with the protection of constitutional rights. It reminds us that the way evidence is gathered and presented can have a profound impact on the fairness of a trial. The Supreme Court's decision helps clarify how criminal statutes should be interpreted and reinforces the importance of procedural safeguards. This is not just about one individual's case. It sets a precedent that could influence many future cases across Canada. For lawyers, judges, and anyone interested in criminal justice, this case underscores the need for careful legal analysis at every stage, from investigation to trial. It also shows how the Supreme Court continues to play a vital role in shaping Canadian law in a way that respects both public safety and individual rights. Thanks for listening to Bench Briefs. Be sure to join us next time for another deep dive into a key Canadian legal case. Until then, take care.